Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. Again, I speak truth to power without fear. And I mean that. And that's what I plan to do tonight and on all these other videos that I post here on YouTube. So I'm going to wait a couple of minutes for people to join before I get started. So just bear with me a second. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I see we have a couple of people in the house. Hopefully people will be able to join later or they'll watch it on the playback. But I've noticed that there have been some changes in the situation involving Nick Cannon. I felt the need to bring this discussion back to YouTube. So as you all know, Nick Cannon has come under fire for statements that he made during a podcast with Professor Griff, formerly from Public Enemy. So they were talking, and the comments that he made have been interpreted to be anti-Semitic. So immediately after this podcast was put out, I think it was a couple of weeks after or so, Viacom decided to fire Nick Cannon. So he lost a lot of his programs that he was a part of. And, he lost a lot of opportunity. And when this first happened, he seemed to be defiant. He seemed to be standing up to the powers that be and standing behind what he said and what his guest said on his program. Within 24 hours, this man completely changed his tune. And the whole situation reminds me of the movie Roots or the TV series Roots, where you had the slave Kunte Kinte. This brother was kidnapped from Africa, brought to America. And even though he was enslaved, he still maintained his sense of African pride and identity. And the brother Kunte Kinte wanted to be free by any means necessary. So he ran away from the plantation. Despite warnings from, some of the slaves there, like Fiddler, Kunte Kinte decided to run and pursue his freedom. Needless to say, as you all know, he was captured by the slave master and brought back to the plantation. And once he was brought back, the slave master strung him up, tied his hands and had his hands strung up, took his shirt off his back. And the slave master had another black slave beat this brother. And to exercise control over Kunte Kinte, the slave master told him that his name was no longer Kunte Kinte and that his name was Toby. The slave master said it was a good name, a good Christian name. And it's going to be his name, and he better learn to love that name. So the master had another slave beat Kunte Kinte into submission. So each time he hit Kunte Kinte, he said, "What's your name?" And at first, Kunte Kinte was defiant. He said, "Kunte Kinte," repeatedly. And then eventually, the master broke Kunte Kinte down, broke his spirit, to the point when the master asked him what is his name, he proceeded to adopt the slave master's name, and he surrendered and said that his name was Toby. At first, he whispered it. He said it real low. And then the master asked him to repeat it loud enough so that all the other people, all the other slaves could hear. And then he repeated it and said his name is Toby. And as I think back to that TV series Roots, I think about this brother, Nick Cannon, and how he was broken by the man, broken by the powers that be. They broke this brother. You know, this brother came out defiant, as I said before, talking all strong, talking all bold, talking about how he wouldn't be bullied, talking about how you can't fire a boss. But then Nick Cannon ended up breaking down and bowing down to his master. And just like the slave on the plantation being beaten in front of all the other slaves, this brother, Nick Cannon, has been beaten into submission before the whole world and before Black people in particular. They're making a loud and clear message. If you mess with us, we'll take everything from you. And that's what they did with this brother. Now, because he submitted, they decided to give him some dog biscuits. You know, just like when your dog does what you want him to do. You know, if he fetches your slippers, you give him a pat on the head and a biscuit, a dog biscuit. And that's what they gave this brother, Nick Cannon. And I'm going to get into it in a second. I'm going to show the articles and read from the articles. So let's go to his statement when he was all defiant. Let's read some excerpts from that statement. So I'm going to share my screen real quick. Shout out to everybody tuning in. I will get to your comments. So here's Nick Cannon before, like all defiant. He put this statement out a day ago. And I'm just going to highlight some points. He was like, I don't have to defend myself here. The proof is in the history. And then he goes on about this, about the corporations and this and that. Let me just get to, and he even cites Shirley Chisholm. He says, I'm unbossed and unbought and unbothered. He's quoting Shirley Chisholm. And he even quotes Malcolm X about how the media is the most powerful entity on earth. It will have you hating people being oppressed and loving people doing the oppressing, making the innocent guilty and the guilty innocent. This is him talking all this stuff. He talks about the threats that he received. And he goes on to say, Viacom's goal is to keep me from providing for my family and lineage, excuse me. And he says that plan will be foiled. They can try to kick me while I'm down or force me to kiss the master's feet in public for shame and ridicule. But instead, I stand firm on my square with my fist in the air, repeating my mantra, you can't fire a boss. This is him a day ago, talking all this stuff, talking all strong and bold. And this statement goes on rather long. I'm not going to read all of it. I know that there's a segment where he talks about being bullied, and I just want to get to that section. Just bear with me a second. He says, I will not be bullied, silenced. I will not be bullied, silenced, or continuously oppressed by any organization, group, or corporation. I am disappointed that Viacom does not understand or respect the power of the Black community. So that's him a day ago. And then I go on to Facebook and I see this article right here. Nick Cannon apologizes to Jewish sisters and brothers. And it says that he will keep the Masked Singer gig. That's the bone. That's the biscuit that they gave him. That's the pat on their head that they gave this man for bowing down and submitting to their will. That's the biscuit that they gave this man for doing what he is told by his master, just like a dog doing exactly what he's been told by his master. So I'm going to get into what he had to say in a second, but it's just like, I can understand if somebody thinks that they make a mistake. You know, people do this all the time, but this brother didn't think that he made a mistake. He believed in what he said. That's the appearance that you would think, based on the way he was posturing with these statements and all that stuff. If you believe something that you have said, you don't let anybody punk you to the point where you decide to completely retract what you said and come up with some apology when there was no real need for an apology. And I'm going to get into some other things about this statement and this whole situation in a second, but let me read from the statement. He said, "First and foremost, I extend my deepest and most sincere apologies to my Jewish sisters and brothers for the hurtful and divisive words that came out of my mouth during my interview with Richard Griffin. They reinforced the worst stereotypes of a proud and magnificent people. I feel ashamed of the uninformed and naive place those words came from. The video of this interview has been removed." And then this talks about his defiance and stuff like that. And where he was claiming that he wanted full ownership. You know, his prior statements, he was defiant, as I said before, and he claimed full ownership of his show Wild 'N Out. And then he went on to say this with his apologies. He said, "I want to assure my Jewish friends, new and old, that this is only the beginning of my education. I am committed to deeper connections, more profound learning, and strengthening the bond between our two cultures every day and going forward." And then he thanked rabbis, community leaders, and institutions who reached out to me to help enlighten me instead of chastising. And this goes on to say, Fox, which hosts his other program, The Masked Singer, issued a statement of its own. And it says, they basically said this. They said, "Nick Cannon has sincerely apologized and quickly taken steps to educate himself and make amends. On that basis, and given a belief that this moment calls for dialogue, we will move forward with Nick and help him advance this important conversation broadly. Fox condemns all forms of hate directed towards any community, and we will continue." No, it says we will combat bigotry of any kind. So basically, again, he got back his gig with the Masked Singer in exchange for giving up his dignity, giving up his pride, giving up his self-respect, bowing down. Like he said, he was talking about bowing down, and that's exactly what he ended up doing, bowing down and kissing these people's feet and kissing their ass. He went from super militant, all strong and defiant, to yes, sir, boss, yes, sir, master, Yes, sir, Mr. Charlie. And it's just a damn shame, man. And it's like, it's not only just about him, it's about sending a message to all these black entertainers that want to step out of line or out of pocket the way they see it. They're basically telling them, we will check you. We will put you in your place if you get out of line. Um, and it's just a shame. This tells you the kind of power that these people exercise over these entertainers. As I was saying yesterday, this is a prime example of why we need to have our own and to do for ourselves. Because when you are completely dependent on others, you can't be your authentic self. You can't speak truth to power when somebody else is paying your bills, when somebody else is giving you the means that you need to provide for your family and for yourself. You are beholden to those who are feeding you, just like a child is beholden to their parents, or even if you break it down on an even more basic level, just like a dog is dependent on his master for shelter and food. That's how these entertainers are, the ones we're taught to admire so much. And it's just a shame to see this happen. I mean, not only is he backtracking on his thing, he's essentially indirectly throwing his brother Professor Griff under the bus. Um, and it's just so disgraceful to see a man just broken down like this after talking all this militant talk. Now he's like, yes, sir, Mr. Charlie. Yes, sir, Mr. Boss Man. Just like those old slave movies where they got the black man all submissive and talking all crazy and totally punkified and defeated. And that's what this brother looks like. He looks like a defeated man. So yeah, I just had to get on here and just express my frustration. And like I said yesterday, I don't agree with everything that was said. But just off a general principle, I just hate the idea of somebody being forced to bow down, to kowtow, and to change their whole script because of intimidation. And as I said yesterday, all this does is feed that narrative of control and domination and influence, the very narrative that they say is anti-Semitic. So yeah, so I'm going to check out what you all have to say about this. I appreciate you all tuning in. So let me check out the comments. Shout out to Sean. Thanks for tuning in. Shout out to Lonnie, One Love. DJ Wiz, shout out to you. So DJ Wiz said, I'm surprised he apologized now. Last I heard, he was trying to get to the rights to that show from Viacom so he could air it somewhere else. Even Diddy offered him a spot for Nick's show on his network. Yeah, I mean, that's something that I talked about yesterday. It just seems like he wouldn't have just caved this soon, man. It's like he could have tried to work with Diddy or others to try to continue his programs and all that kind of stuff elsewhere, or to create new ones. This is just a sad day, man. It's just messed up. Shout out to Def Rocker. Peace and blessings to you. Yeah, so Rob said, no surprise. Nick didn't want to lose his Fox job. And that's one thing that I wanted to say. Like, Fox is talking about how they're so against bigotry and all this kind of stuff. How can you be against bigotry when you promote it every day on your Fox News network? Fox is a joke. Fox is ridiculous. Fox is hypocritical. They're going to condemn this brother, but yet and still they have bigots and, self-hating coon Negroes on their programs all the time, bashing the black community, bashing the legitimate cause for justice in these police brutality cases. So they're the last ones to talk about anybody being bigoted anybody being prejudiced, anybody being racist. So Sean said, I hate when certain black people call themselves bosses but are working under someone else as their boss. Exactly, man. It's just messed up. Um, so Lottie said she knew he was going to apologize. Yeah, so let's see. Just bear with me a second. Yeah, it's just a shame, man. Shout out to David Bowman. Thanks for tuning in. So Tyrone Miles said, unfortunately, we love white people too much to branch out on our own. Yeah, it's like we've been programmed to be slaves, man. I mean, programmed to be under somebody, to be controlled by somebody. You know, rarely are people taught in school to create their own. You know, instead their goal is to get some job working for somebody else. And that's one of the things that was real interesting. Like I was talking to someone by text message, and we were just talking about like Nick Cannon's apology. It seems like his statements, you know, the statements that he made about melanin and all that kind of stuff, it seemed like those are broad statements that could be applied to all white people and all that kind of stuff. But when you look at his apology didn't have anything to do with white people. It wasn't an apology to just white people, period. It was an apology specifically directed towards Jews. And the question is, why is that? Why is that the case? And again, you know, a lot of the circumstances around this whole thing, they don't help. All they do is reinforce the views that people had, you know, these views of dominance of a particular group of people. So Wright said, finally, someone who's talking some real sense. This is why I love your channel. I thought I was going crazy. Yeah, you said what you said. Stick to that because they always do. Yeah, I feel you. I'm glad that you know, have positive things to say about this channel. Yeah, so Demetrius made a good point. If you're not going to stand by what you say, don't say it. See, I think Nick Cannon got real comfortable. Like he felt like he was just having some private conversation in his home or whatever. And he got real loose with things. And as soon as, you know, the heat hit him, you know, and all this pressure came to bear on him, at first he was trying to maintain his dignity, just like Kunte Kinte trying to maintain his name and his identity and all that kind of stuff. But a few more lashes from the man forced him to completely change his tune. Yeah, so Def Rocker said, we'll never be autonomous in our thinking as long as we're dependent on others for their outlets. Exactly. So, yeah, I don't want to keep y'all too long. You know, I want to thank everyone for tuning in. You know, those people who watch this on the playback, I'm really interested in hearing from you. What do you think about Nick Cannon completely changing his tune around this issue? Um, so I welcome your comments. Please rate, comment, subscribe, spread the word about this channel, encourage your friends to subscribe. and hit that notification bell so that you'll know when I post new content on here. A lot of times people aren't aware of when I go live and all that kind of stuff. Hit that notification bell so that way you will know instantly. So with that, peace and blessings, everyone. Thank you for tuning in, and good night.